Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're joining us from. Again, we'd like to extend a warm welcome to our session today, Understanding the Basics of DBT, a four-part foundational series, and this is session 3, Strategies for Emotion Regulation. This webinar is presented and sponsored by the MHTTC. We're here housed at Rutgers in the School of Health Professions in the Department of Psychiatric Rehabilitation and Counseling Professions. My name is Gati. I'm the project coordinator of this center, and we'll be introducing our webinar center and webinar speaker for today. Next slide, please. Again, the MHTTC is funded by SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, to enhance the capacity of the behavioral health workforce and deliver evidence-based and promising practices to individuals with mental health conditions. We also address the full continuum of services spanning mental illness prevention, treatment, and recovery supports. And we provide training-related workforces to also provide effective services with people with mental health conditions. We also utilize supplemental funding to support school teachers and staff to address student mental health. Next slide, please. We also offer training programs on evidence-based practices for serious mental health conditions, wellness and recovery for providers and people with mental health conditions, school mental health, both comprehensive, multi-tiered services and supports, Hispanic and Latinx mental health education, online education courses such as Wellness Matters, IMR, functional thinking, and more. Next slide, please. Just a reminder that all of our training programs featured on your screen, as well as products and services, are available to you at no cost. Next slide, please. And if you're interested in staying up to date with the events and products that the Northeast and Caribbean MHTTC is providing, we ask that you please sign up to receive our email communications. You may do so by scanning the QR code that you see on your screen, and I will also share the link to join in the chat box. Next slide, please. Following this webinar, you'll be asked to complete a brief survey. We value this feedback and use it to improve our activities and inform our future activities. The surveys are also important because our continued funding is linked to their completion, so we thank you in advance for your participation. Slide, please. We also want to let you know that this webinar is being recorded and will be posted on our website along with our presenter slides in PDF format within 7 days of this webinar broadcast. You will receive an email containing links to view the recording and download the PDF version of the slides, again, within 7 days of this webinar broadcast. Next slide, please. At the time of this presentation, Marian Delphin Rittman served as Acting Assistant Secretary for Mental Health and Substance Use at SAMHSA. The opinions expressed herein are the views of the speakers and do not reflect the official position of the Department of Health and Human Services or SAMHSA. No official support or endorsement of DHHS or SAMHSA for the opinions described in this presentation is intended or should be inferred. Next slide, please. We encourage you to interact with our presenter during the webinar by using the chat feature. Please post any comments or questions you have in the chat, and I will collect your questions as we go and ask them of the presenter during the Q&A time toward the end of the presentation. During our webinar, the presenter may pose questions to you, so please use the chat feature to answer them. Please. As a reminder, the MHTTC network is committed to using affirming, respectful, and recovery-oriented language in all activities and products. Next slide, please. We wanted to let you know that the new 3-digit dialing code for the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is now available. 988 is not just a suicide crisis line. It is for people experiencing a suicidal, mental health, or substance use crisis or any kind of emotional distress. It is also for people who are concerned about someone experiencing a crisis. You can connect by dialing or calling or texting 988 or you can chat online at 988lifeline.org. Calls, texts, or chats are responded to by a trained counselor. Now let's begin our webinar. We have Crystal Socha with us today. Crystal is a PhD candidate and a senior training and consultation specialist at Rutgers School of Health Professions in the Department of Psychiatric Rehabilitation and Counseling Professions. Crystal's primary role includes providing in-person and remote training, consultation, and technical assistance to New Jersey agencies that provide community support services. She has over 10 years of experience in the behavioral health field, delivering trauma-informed, culturally responsive, gender-affirming care and supporting individuals in building a life worth living. Before joining Rutgers, she provided recovery-oriented services in supportive housing, intensive in-home and in-community settings, community mental health centers, integrated primary care, hospital systems, and private practices. She has received a 40-hour foundational training in dialectical behavioral therapy by the Linden Hand board-certified clinician and utilizes a DBT-informed approach within her work as a counselor. Again, welcome everyone, and I'll turn it over to Crystal.
Thank you so much, and thank you as always for the warm welcome. Excited to be here again. This is our four-part foundational skills series, really just an overview of what DBT is. This week we are covering session 3, which includes strategies for emotion regulation. And this is where I want to be when I think about regulating emotions. So welcome again. Feel free to engage with us throughout this presentation. I will ask you many questions throughout. So thank you again for being here. Just to get us started with some learning objectives, this session again is geared towards all things emotion regulation. So we'll talk about when to use emotion regulation skills, help individuals to identify how to change unwanted emotions using skills like checking the facts, problem solving, or opposite action. We'll also recognize how to assist clients in reducing emotional vulnerability to that emotion mind, which we talked about early on, and managing some of those extreme emotions. And then, as always, we have a case study at the end as well. So I want to get a sense of, if you were here last week, did you get a chance to practice a distress tolerance skill? Yes or no in the chat. Excuse me. What went well? What was difficult? What was challenging? And did you get a chance to teach someone else that skill? Let me know some of your thoughts in the chat. I'm seeing some yeses. If you weren't here, no worries. So yes and yes, working on teaching my kids. So as a reminder, some of those distress tolerance skills included the stop skill, so stopping and taking a step back. The tip skill, which talked about changing the temperature of your body through ice. That's a quick and easy one wherever you are. I recommended last time, if you're working for an agency or a private practice or a community mental health setting, I found the breakable ice packs pretty quick and accessible, or just putting ice cubes in the freezer. If someone's experiencing a really intense emotion. We talked about distracting skills, self-soothing skills. We also talked a little bit about radical acceptance and being mindful of some of those thoughts as well. So thank you for your feedback. I see being able to model them for my daughter for her use as well. That's a really great thing. A lot of the times we are in situations where we are models for people, whether it's family, friends, loved ones, or the people that we're serving. Everything that we do is really being observed. I see some folks practicing mindfulness skills, so doing one task at a time, acknowledging the difficulty in doing that. And again, no worries if you forgot. Feel free to take a look at that past presentation and get a chance to practice some of those skills because they can be quite helpful. All right. So we will just transition into today, and I also have an activity to get us started. But again, we are in our emotion regulation week. So emotion regulation really does include getting awareness and being able to label and identify those emotions, as well as, to an extent, being able to control that emotional response. I mentioned before that Marsha Linehan often says that to a certain extent, we are who we are. And emotionality is really just a part of us. So it can be normal, and it is normal to experience a whole range of emotions. But helping us and our clients learn how to identify, name, label, and perhaps change responses to emotions, manage really difficult emotions can be so helpful. All right, so we'll start off with an activity for today. What I would like you to do is either find a piece of paper, pen, writing utensil, use your computer, maybe write it in an email. Would love to see it in the chat thereafter if you feel comfortable. If you want to type it in the chat all at once, you may have to press the shift button and return. But what I want you to do is write your name, however you choose, from top to bottom on a piece of paper. I like to get like a sticky notepad and then just write it vertically from top to bottom. And then identify activities you enjoy using each letter of your name. And I'll show an example using my name. So I identified some of the following, and you'll see I wrote my name vertically, Crystal. Identified things that start with the letter C that I enjoy doing: crafting, coloring, cloud watching. For the letter C, for R, I wrote riding a bike, and so on and so forth. So I'll give us just a moment. I find this to be a great activity for almost any age, and especially if you're working in a group setting, to really start off the group. So we'll give us just a moment to practice this, and if you feel comfortable at the end of it, would love to see what you came up with. So I'll give us just a moment here and check back in shortly. See some of us working on sharing in the chat, and you may have to press, if you're doing each letter vertically, you may have to press shift and return or shift and enter. Feel free to write your name in a Word document or an email if that's easier. It might be a little difficult in the chat. Or I see a strategic way of just putting it all in a row. Give us another moment here. All right, if you feel comfortable sharing, feel free to share in the chat. I know there's many of us here, but it's exciting to see what we come up with. We all got different letters in our name, and we all enjoy different things. So whether this is an activity that you enjoy now, in the past, at some point in your life. I hope that you can keep this in mind as we go through this session today, because towards the end there is a pleasant events checklist that we go through with clients when we're thinking about emotion regulation. So I find this to be a fun way to be a little creative. Sometimes individuals have a hard time identifying things that they enjoy. I've also done this, of course, with gratitude. So identifying things that I'm grateful for that start with each letter of my name. I've also done it in the form of affirmations or positive self-statements, perhaps. So feel free to share what you came up with in the chat, or what I've done is I put it in a sticky note and I just leave it around somewhere that's helpful. See lots of lounging, thrifting, Tara. I want to be your friend, antiquing. I so relate. Long walks, understanding things, new recipes, ice cream recipes, new experiences. I like the nothing. Doing nothing is an all-time hobby of mine as well. Acknowledging God's presence in my life, staying positive, love that. Engaging with people, discussing ideas, art. Mind my own business. I like that. Okay. Sleeping, stargazing. Ooh, hiking, Appalachian Trail hike. So many great activities here. And I will, again, give that disclaimer of there is a handout in Marshall and Hand's workbook that lists over 200 and some pleasant events. Some of these that you mentioned may not even be on there, so of course you can add your own. But I find this as a helpful way to help clients get thinking in identifying some things that whether they enjoyed in the past, whether they enjoy at present, really being creative with this can be a good way to remind them of the things that they enjoy doing. So I'll share the resources at the end. The DBT skills training manual and associated workbook with handouts has this exact handout in it as well. So stay tuned. Yes. All right. Thank you for that. We will keep it moving, but feel free to use this in any variety, of course, whether it's activities, gratitude, affirmations. It's so much fun, in my opinion. So feel free to take a moment and do that, if not on your own with an individual client or a group of clients. Riding roller coasters, that was a favorite pastime of mine too. Okay, so we are getting into emotion regulation. And again, thank you for taking the time to do that. I hope that was a good way to get you thinking. I try to switch up exercises from the start, but again, we are going into emotion regulation. And what comes to mind when you think about emotion regulation without using the words emotion and regulate? See highs and lows of feelings, being able to control how we feel, staying calm in the chaos, managing emotions, managing highs and lows, how we interact with the world and ourselves in response to our feelings. Yes, absolutely. Managing feelings, identifying emotions, sitting with it, control, awareness and control, accepting things as they come, temperament, ups and downs, responses to our feelings, how one processes and handles emotions. Relax, relate, release. I love a good alliteration. Acknowledging feelings and working through them. Yeah. So absolutely, it's really a combination of all of these things, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. But emotion regulation is really the ability to control or influence the emotions that we have when you have them and how you experience them and express them. So the first part that we'll talk about is kind of this awareness of emotions, because many times individuals really struggle with identifying and labeling. And then the second part really is regulating to the point of being able to help individuals regulate emotions on their own. So many of you have likely seen a variety of versions of this feeling wheel. I put this one in because I like this one, and it doesn't include some sections of the feelings wheel include a bad feeling. I personally don't like to identify feelings as bad or negative. We'll talk about that in just a moment, but emotion regulation in general, Marshall Linehan says it teaches individuals to understand and name their emotions and know what these emotions do for them. We are helping them decrease the frequency and intensity, so how often and how much they are feeling these unwanted, painful, difficult, distressing emotions to ultimately help them reduce that emotional vulnerability and overwhelm. We're helping them increase their own resilience and decrease emotional suffering so that a person doesn't make situations worse. Similar with distress tolerance, we're just trying not to make situations worse. And we know that emotions can be automatic. There is some degree in which we can control our feelings again, but we are who we are, and it can be difficult to manage emotions all the time. We do experience kind of this roller coaster of feelings throughout our life, but using emotion regulation helps us to be able to learn how to handle that feeling and how to respond differently. And it really always goes back to being more mindful. Mindfulness is the core of DBT. If we don't have mindfulness, we don't know how to regulate our emotions. We can't be aware of what's happening for us in that moment. I love the feelings wheel as well. And again, there's so many different versions. It really helps us label and name some of these variety of feelings here. Okay, so in emotion regulation within our DBT module, this specifically covers understanding and naming emotions, which might look like, again, identifying and labeling emotions, what emotions do for this person. There's also a model for describing emotions. That's a really great handout, and we'll talk about ways to describe your emotions. So there's associated handouts as well, which we'll talk about. Has anyone seen the movie Inside Out? There's an Inside Out 2 coming out, so that's a good time. If you have or have not seen the movie Inside Out, think about, again, those feelings, joy, anger, sadness. I'm forgetting, but I can see their heads. But there's a really great video that helps individuals to guess the feelings or name the emotions that this person is experiencing without identifying who they are. And then there's another clip that labels them as well. This is a perfect room to be in where everyone wants to see Inside Out 2. I saw a clip of Inside Out 2 yesterday. It demonstrated a panic attack and the onslaught of difficulty and swirling emotions. That one I did not see. So a great way, again, depending on the individual that you're serving, I find it helpful for all ages, really, but adolescents, of course, can benefit as well. Opposite action is another skill that we will cover along with problem solving. We'll talk a little bit about reducing vulnerability to that emotion mind, which includes a couple set of skills we'll talk about. So it includes accumulating positive emotions in the short term. That's the way the book calls them, as well as identifying pleasant events, values and priorities. There's an ABC please skill we'll talk about as well. And then managing really difficult emotions or mindfulness of current emotions, which sometimes is referred to as riding the wave as well. Okay. So what do emotions do for you? What's the purpose of an emotion? Because we know each emotion serves a purpose. Why do we have them? Tell us something, provide valuable feedback, understand how you are. Reaction, make me feel alive. I love that. Yes, emotions are so complex, but they all serve a purpose, and we absolutely need them for survival. Alert you, regardless of this feeling. And the purpose of emotions is not to get rid of them. Often individuals come see us and they say, I don't want to feel this way anymore. I can't feel this way anymore. Well, if only we could wave a magic wand and make that feeling disappear. But we know that this is because many individuals also struggle with trusting their emotions and feel worried that they're going to experience this really difficult emotion again. I've seen some great responses in the chat. So individuals may not have any role models or have ever had any role models who have modeled emotions effectively for them. And so if you're feeling a really intense or overwhelming feeling, you just want to push it away. I don't blame you. But emotions are also very hard to change because some individuals might be hardwired to an extent. Think about, in a life-threatening situation, if your house is on fire and you need to run for your life, it would be very hard to stop being afraid before you actually get away from the fire. So we need these feelings for survival. But emotions do prepare us for action. So again, think about it. If there is a fire or a tsunami or a natural disaster or whatever it might be, and you spoke to someone and said, I think there's a fire. Imagine the difference in the person's response, and maybe they wouldn't hear you. They wouldn't be as, their emotions wouldn't shift, their body language would not change versus if you started screaming that there's a fire or that there's a tsunami approaching or that there's, danger approaching. This might alert someone differently. Emotions can also communicate to others as well as ourselves. So whether we intend to or not, emotions do have an influence on other people. Think about the ways in which you make friends. If you're expressing warmth or happiness towards someone, they're likely to enjoy your company most of the time. If you are, I'll give an example. What do you experience or feel when a baby cries? Concern, sadness, concern, love and sadness all at the same time, empathy, worry, anxiety, concern, maybe worry. Right. Maybe you have the urge to comfort or soothe. But if we didn't experience any emotions, we wouldn't have that urge to comfort a crying baby. So emotions communicate to ourselves and to others, prepare us for this action, prepare us exactly what are the baby's needs. This baby might need something. It allows for us to take a pause, listen to our gut, what's going on for us, and being mindful. So we'll talk more about that. Yes, yes. So with that, what makes regulating emotions hard? And I know I'm asking you a lot of questions today. So what makes it so hard? We know that emotions serve a purpose and a function. We need them to survive. What makes them difficult? The intensity, absolutely. Uncomfortable. Feeling out of control. Trying to figure out what will be helpful. I actually enjoy doing like popsicle sticks in these are pens, but imagine popsicle sticks in a cup with labeled skills. And for individuals who struggle with identifying what skill to use, these are skills that they know are tried and true. Feeling like these emotions are permanent, not wanting to appear weak, aggressive, especially depending on cultural thoughts on these emotions, absolutely. Triggers of past events, not being able to soothe, feeling justified in intense emotions. We'll talk about that in just a moment too. When is an emotion really justified? So a couple things that Marshall Linehan talks about, and some of which you've covered. Biology, we talked about, if you were in our previous session, we talked about that biosocial model of vulnerability and living in an invalidating environment. Some people may experience more emotional vulnerability than others. Some clients have skills, but they're not effective or they're ineffective skills. So you can have a skill to cope with something like substance use, but that doesn't mean that it is going to make the situation better. It's likely making the situation worse. So they're lacking those effective skills. Reinforcement of emotional behavior. So if people only listen and help you when you become very sad and tearful and cry a lot, it might be very hard to stop being sad because you're getting a need met from crying. Your current emotion might control you instead of wise mind. So the mood or the state that you're in often controls the decision making and the impulsivity of the person, and the difficulty in accessing their wise mind. So we talked about that wise mind really being where your values lie and helping this person to identify how they can access their wise mind. But oftentimes individuals may choose not to be skillful in those moments. Emotional overwhelm, overload, confusion, again, having difficulty accessing wise mind. Maybe they're reaching a skills breakdown point, feels like nothing's working. And there's also emotion myths. So there's often these emotional myths that are reinforced over time and influence our behavior. So again, think about some of the ways we talked about this invalidating environment. If you were taught as a child that it's not okay to feel or express an emotion, you may believe that as an adult, being vulnerable and showing your feelings or sharing your feelings is not appropriate. So this includes times where, I'll actually pause there, but because there are some myths, but this includes times where people say, if I feel something, then it must be true. But I'm going to have you take a moment to complete this poll. So we are going to guess the myth. I'm going to launch this poll. Okay, so you should see on your screen a poll that is launched, and it says which statement or statements about emotions are a myth. There is a right way to feel in every situation. Negative feelings are bad. Being emotional means being out of control. Letting others know that I'm feeling bad is a weakness. All of the above. So you can pick 1, 2, 3, 4, all of them. Give us just a moment here. All right, I'm gonna pause, share. I may have given it away because I put in all of the above option, but if you checked all of the above, it is all of the above. So if you identified any of them, you're right. I'm going to stop sharing. There's a really great handout when we think about myths about emotions in the DBT skills binder that talks about myths about emotions. So this is only 10 of them, but it's a really great handout to help individuals challenge some of these myths. And I've seen people get so creative. I'm highly impressed with their ability to think about these myths in a different way and challenge these myths. So all of these listed here and the ones mentioned are myths, but again, these are some of the things that get in the way of changing and acknowledging and responding to emotions differently. If we believe that there's a right way to feel in every situation, we may struggle with trying to figure out how to feel the quote right way. If we believe some emotions are stupid, we may be suppressing or pushing back emotions. If we believe painful emotions are not important and should be ignored, okay, well, I'm never going to ask for comfort, or I'm not going to try to comfort myself in those difficult times. So I find this to be a great handout, and you'll see it's emotion regulation handout 4A. There's about 10 more that helps individuals really challenge some of these. And of course, you don't have to do them all at once, but it is really fun. And I've seen, like I said, clients get super creative in this one. So keep that in mind that those myths do exist and influence the way that we think and feel and respond to emotions. Another handout that I'd like to talk about, and that is in the early stages of emotion regulation, is this model for describing emotions. And this model looks different on the handout. It can get a little confusing, so I just made it into a circle for the sake of this presentation. But there's a lot of components that comprise an emotion. And before anything actually happens, before we actually feel something, there's a lot of things that make us more vulnerable to a situation. So think about the last 24 hours with this person when you're helping them identify an emotion. Did they sleep? Did they eat? Did they use substances? Are there any stressful things that may have happened? Did they not have food? Did they worry that their house was in jeopardy, that they were going to be evicted? Those things are already pre-existing vulnerability factors. Then on top of that, there is the actual prompting event or the event or situation that occurs right before this emotion starts. So they're the cues that set off that emotion and happen moment to moment. So this might be an internal prompt. So this might be inside the person, their thoughts, behaviors, physical reactions. It might be external, so outside this person in the environment. Think about Marshall Linehan gives an example like rain on a wedding day, rain when you're going to an event. If you like rain, maybe that example isn't for you, but thinking of things that are outside of your control and outside the environment. Along with that, there has to be some attention or awareness. So there needs to be an acknowledgement or a mindfulness that something is happening. So you actually need to realize, okay, this event happened and how it's impacting my experience. The next thing that happens is that interpretation of events. So when a situation happens and you have awareness that it happens, what's the story that you're telling yourself related to this event? What's the meaning that you're ascribing to this event and helping clients explore what that is? So those thoughts, beliefs, assumptions about the event. I'll give an example in a later slide. Vulnerability factors again. So this could be things from the past. It could be unresolved trauma, biological changes that happen in the person's brain and nervous system, experiences or those body sensations related to feeling. So the heaviness, the palms are sweating, low energy, emptiness. Expressions. So this includes face, body language, the verbal and nonverbal. Actions, what you end up actually doing as a result of all these prior things mentioned. So as a result of the prompting event, interpretations, what happened in my body, this is what I actually did. How you may have named or identified that emotion, and then what that emotion does after. We know that intense emotions have powerful after effects on memory, thoughts, the ability to think. And we also may experience a primary emotion, so that immediate first reaction, as well as secondary emotions, so the kind of additional emotions associated with that. We are likely experiencing more than one emotion at a time. We may have one, we may have a couple. So keeping that in mind. And when we're helping individuals identify this model for describing these emotions, there's also a really great handout about ways to describe emotions. And I just picked one. But when you're helping clients to identify, let's say, anger, you'll see there's a whole variety of anger words at the top. There's some prompting events that may have prompted that feeling, and it really goes through this model. So then interpretations. This next part, you'll see what happens in this person's body, hands clenching, teeth clamping together, expressions of anger, and then the after effects. Maybe this person experiences this numbness, dissociative experience. And so I find this to be helpful, and there's ways to describe emotions, including anger, disgust, envy, joy. All of the emotions have their own associated handout, especially for those who really struggle with identifying emotions. This can be such a helpful tool. And if you remember this slide, you may know that there are a few options for solving any problem. So if you're here before, this is not new, but this is where we are. You have 4 options in solving a problem, and we are at the part where you can feel better about the problem or change your emotional reaction to the problem by using emotion regulation skills. So keep this in mind. It can be helpful when individuals are saying yes, but especially when thinking about changing an emotional response, reminding them that there's 4 options to solving a problem. So they can solve the problem by changing the situation. If there's a way to solve it, they can find a way to feel better or change their emotional response. They can accept and tolerate, which we talked about last week, is this radical acceptance piece, radically accepting the situation for what it is. And then staying miserable or making things worse, not using any effective skills. And so with emotion regulation, there are, again, a couple ways to change those unwanted emotions. Is anyone familiar with, I'll start with checking the facts, because this is used in many other modalities as well. What does it mean to check the facts? The evidence, yes. So changing beliefs and assumptions about a situation to fit the facts can help you change your emotional reaction to it. And so this requires that you check the facts first, and checking the facts is really just a strategy to help you identify what is happening here. When your emotions do fit the facts of the situations and you want to change your emotions and the situation is the problem, perhaps there's a way to problem solve. But if your emotions don't fit the facts of that situation, meaning they're not justified, the emotions do not align with this situation, then there's a way to act opposite. And we'll talk about those in just a moment. So helping clients to find a way to check the facts. So many emotions and actions are set off or happen because of our thoughts and interpretations of the event. So oftentimes there's an event that happens, then next to that event is a thought. You have a thought associated with this event, and then you feel something. There's also a way where we have an event that happens, we feel something, and then we create a narrative around this event. So when we're helping individuals to check the facts, what we want to help them is identify what's that emotion I want to change. Okay, let's say it's sadness. Let's say that there is a really close friend of yours that made plans without you, and you're feeling sad. And so that's the event. You know that this friend made plans and you weren't invited. And that's a matter of facts. There's no judgment associated there. I'm not interpreting it just yet. But the third part is my interpretation. So maybe I say, well, this person made plans without me, and that means this person doesn't love me. They don't want to be my friend anymore. They're never going to talk to me again. I don't know what I did. I can't believe that I didn't get invited. And now we're going down this spiral. Worst case scenario, we're thinking about every way to interpret this situation. So we're asking this person, what's the story that you're telling yourself? What are other possibilities about this situation? Can you consider other possibilities? The fourth part is assuming or asking if you are assuming a threat. So we often mention and talk about danger and discomfort being two different feelings. Is there an actual threat to my life or someone else's life or someone's life that I care about? Or am I really uncomfortable in this feeling? I'm feeling embarrassed. I'm not sure what happened. I'm not in danger, but I'm potentially uncomfortable. What is the worst thing that could happen? If you could play this tape forward, what is the worst thing that could happen? And what if it did happen and you were able to handle it? Okay, you didn't get invited into the event. You didn't get invited to the party. You are able to get through that difficult situation. What does that look like? And then the last part is, does my emotion or its intensity fit the facts? If my emotion does not fit the facts, consider using opposite action, which we'll talk about. But when we are asking and helping a client identify, does my emotion or its intensity fit the facts, we want to check in with their wise mind. Again, we learned about wise mind early on, and we're helping individuals identify how likely is it that this person won't be your friend anymore. That's that interpretation. How great or important is this outcome of not going to the party? And then how effective is that feeling of sadness on your life right now? If you're sad and you want to isolate and never speak to this person again and think that they don't want to be your friend, how effective might that be? And then again, thinking of the flip side, are there other possibilities? Are there other possible solutions? Did she forget to invite you? Did she not get a chance to send you a text message just yet? Thinking of all the possible outcomes. And then when we're transitioning into opposite action, so now we are wanting to change this emotion. So when we talk about opposite action, it's when your emotions do not fit the facts, or when acting on your emotion is not effective. So every emotion has an action urge. And it's often the urge that's the problem, not the problem, but how to tolerate it is the difficulty. So, for example, when we think about the emotion of sadness and the situation I just shared, perhaps this person has the action urge to withdraw, isolate, stay in bed. They don't want to leave the room. They're never getting out of their house again. In order to act opposite on that emotion, in this case, we talk about getting active, and that doesn't mean being happy. The opposite of sadness is not happiness. It's the opposite of that action urge. So if the urge is to stay in bed, okay, can we plant our feet on the earth, stand up? Can we go brush our teeth? Can we go wash our face? Can we go take a shower? And can we continue to act opposite on this action urge? So if you have a fear of bugs or spiders or birds, you might have the action urge to never go outside again. If you have fear, maybe your action urge is to avoid forever. But could you act opposite and approach gently? Of course, this takes time with gradual exposure, but acting opposite really means avoiding and doing things that make you feel competent, self-confident, you're engaging in something pleasurable, even if it feels really uncomfortable. So it is a way to change that difficult emotion when that emotion is not effective. And we want to reduce that intense feeling related to that unwanted emotion when it does not fit the facts. So staying in bed, being sad about not being invited to something for the rest of your life may not be an emotion that fits those facts. There's a really great handout when we're talking about how to act opposite step by step. So it goes through these several steps. So the first is identifying and naming that emotion and helping individuals to label emotions using some of those handouts that we've mentioned. We're checking the facts to see if that emotion is justified. So for example, how do you feel when you are on your way to work, you're already running late, and someone cuts you off and is driving very slow in front of you? Stressed, frustrated, multiple feelings going on for sure. Angry, annoyed, right? So it may be reasonable or justified to feel irritated or frustrated or annoyed, but it may not be reasonable to act on that emotion and engage in road rage and then tailgate this person for the next 15 minutes and follow them to their house. That may not necessarily be a justified action. So opposite action tells us to avoid rather than attack this person, to be kind rather than to be mean. I often give someone a nice thumbs up when something like that happens. The next part is identifying and describing those action urges. So what do you want to do based on this emotion? And asking if this is a wise mind decision. Is following this person home for the next 15 minutes a wise mind decision? Is acting on this emotion effective? And then identifying an opposite action. What could you do instead? Could you give this person a thumbs up? I see someone says they might feel annoyed and then they pray. You might kind of just get through that moment, acknowledge that you're going to be late to work, and let your boss know later. And you want to keep acting opposite all the way. So if we're thinking about the example of sadness and this person wants to isolate, they want to continue to act opposite, meaning continue to get up. The first thing we might do is, again, get out of our bed. Mission accomplished. And it doesn't have to be acting opposite all the way right at that very moment, because it may take some time to gradually build that up, but we want to help individuals to continue to act opposite. And then we want to repeat acting opposite. So doing so until that action urge of that emotion of sadness changes. So thinking about those moments where, you're feeling this heaviness. You have a case of the Mondays. You're ready to go back to work, but you're feeling so exhausted from the weekend. You're feeling sad about going back to work. One step might be getting up, taking a shower, and continuing to go about your day, making yourself breakfast, making yourself a nice cup of coffee, and so on. Another way when we talk about with emotion regulation is problem solving. So when the emotions do fit the facts of a situation and you want to change your emotions to that situation, we talk about solving the problem to reduce that frequency of negative emotions. And so here's a list of steps that we will include in this presentation, but in brief, we're again always figuring out what that problem is, we're checking the facts, we're identifying what you want to gain or what is the goal, identifying possible solutions, every single possible solution that you could identify, choosing a solution that may work, that feels reasonable, putting it into action, seeing if it worked. Did it work? Amazing, great news. If not, let's go back to step 5 and find another solution that we identified. So finding a different way to solve that problem and change your emotions to that problem. With reducing emotional vulnerability or reducing vulnerability to emotion mind, we know that emotion regulation skills ultimately help decrease that vulnerability. And it won't, again, take or remove those emotions, but it will help some of those emotions feel less distressing, less painful, and also increase that emotional resilience. So we talk about a couple skills here, and I will share a few in just a moment. But when we talk about accumulating positive emotions, that can be short-term or long-term. So short-term could be some of those activities we mentioned in the beginning. Long-term might be making changes in your life so that these pleasant events happen more often, really building a life worth living. Building mastery and coping ahead is another skill, which we'll talk about in just a moment, and then taking care of your mind by taking care of your body. So what are some ways that you take care of your mind by taking care of your body? Walking, getting enough sleep, rest, trying to eat healthy. And so this skill really does talk about going to medical appointments as needed and supporting individuals in accessing balanced eating, avoiding mood-altering substances, balancing sleep, getting meaningful movement. I also like to say, please be very mindful of not imposing your own values onto your clients. We know that it's not appropriate or ethical to talk about nutrition advice or movement advice, but exploring ways that this person can feel confident in taking care of their mind by taking care of their body could just be talking about sleep hygiene. Surrounding myself with positive people, love that. So as I mentioned, one of these ways to accumulate positive emotions in the short term, we talk about this skill of building positive experiences now. And these are words used by Marsha Linehan. So this includes increasing those pleasant events that we identified. If you were here in the very beginning and identified some that you like to do with the letters of your name, this might look like doing 1 or 2 things a day or a week. Being mindful of those experiences, so not focusing on when they're going to end, simply enjoying them in that moment, and being unmindful of worries. So think about, when it's Sunday, you're having a really nice meal with your family or friends, and all of a sudden you're thinking about getting back to work on Monday. Instead of worrying about Monday, let's focus on being mindful in this moment and enjoying this meal together. And so there's a great handout with pleasant events that we talk about. As I mentioned, there's over 200 and something pleasant events on this list. We all need pleasant events in our lives. It's important to help individuals plan those events in advance. It can be helpful to have them kind of use the buddy system if possible. Are you able to do this with them if you're someone who works in the community? Trying to do 1 a week and helping individuals to really identify some of these things from this list. So this is called the pleasant events list. And again, there's over 200 something events on that list that can be helpful to really build this meaningful life for ourselves. And we're getting close to the end, so I will ask briefly, what are some things that you value in your life, whether it's related to career, family, friends, lifestyle? What do you value? If you're here, you may value continuing education and training, and maybe you enjoy learning. I see health, children, pets, plants. Maybe you enjoy relationships. You value being part of a group. You value contributing to a larger community. I see quiet time, quality time. Great. So it is hard to be happy without a life worth living. And so this is really, again, that fundamental tenet of DBT. All lives are worth living. It may not feel like that in the moment, but we need to add perhaps more permanent pleasant events in this person's life and identify values that are important to them. So long-term happiness means experiencing life as worth living. And this often talks about living according to our own personal values. And there's some really great questions that you might ask the individuals that you serve. So what in life are your highest priorities? And then maybe, which value is your highest priority right now? What in life really matters to you? What is the direction you want your life to go in? What is in your life now that you don't want to lose? And what things of value are not in your life right now? Are you doing things that you value? Are you doing things that go against your core values? Where do you need to make changes in your life so that it will match to these most important values? So this is a really great handout. Again, it's called the Values and Priorities List, but it talks about many of those things that we shared and can help individuals to identify, do I value being part of a group? Do I value being self-directed? Do I value being a spiritual person? Another skill here is an ABC. It's called ABC Please, but this part is the C, and it's cope ahead. And it's helping individuals to cope ahead with those difficult emotional situations. And this is almost similar if you think about, creating a safety plan. It's really planning ahead for something that might happen. So you're helping this person identify a situation that may happen, decide what types of coping skills, what do I need to get through the situation, imagining it as vividly as possible and rehearsing this, whether this is in real time through role play, in their mind, and then taking time to also unwind thereafter. So if we know that we're going to experience a really difficult emotion, let's find a way to also unwind and relax thereafter, such as breathing, distracting, self-soothing. The very last skill that I will cover, and thank you for sticking through this. Again, this is a foundational series, although I'm trying to stick as much juicy information as I can in for you. The last piece here is managing extreme emotions. And I'll only talk about mindfulness of current emotions. So managing those extreme emotions so you don't make things worse and reducing some of that suffering. So this again is that ride the wave. Is anyone familiar with riding the wave? If not, this is really where that skill kind of ties in. So just as the ocean changes, so do our emotions. It's normal, for example, to have the urge to want to use substances again and return to a previous behavior, but that urge is temporary. So this discomfort might feel long-lasting, but eventually, like this wave, it crashes and it passes. So every minute that a person is able to delay or distract or let some time pass, they're able to be successful in decreasing the chances of this urge weakening on their own. So you want to help this person observe that feeling, notice it, what's happening, being curious about it, trying not to block the feeling or push it away, exploring what's coming up for this person in their body, and reminding them that they are not this emotion. So they don't need to act on this emotion. They are not glued to this emotion. Remembering times where this person might have felt differently, becoming comfortable with this feeling. And if this person is able to get through this moment, they're able to let 5 minutes pass with this difficult, discomforting emotion, they're able to be successful in regulating some of that difficult feeling. But a lot of this is, again, naming your feeling, noticing it coming up, inviting it home for dinner, and sitting with it. Eventually, that meal will end and time will pass. Unfortunately, I don't have time for this case study, but it is here, so feel free to test yourself if you'd like and see what you might do to support this person in using emotion regulation skills, which we covered in great detail today. And thank you again for sticking through with me on this one. There's so much that I can cover and would love to cover more and do this again in much greater detail, but this is very foundational in nature. So we learned a lot about emotion regulation skills and how they can manage those intense emotions and ultimately help individuals improve their overall well-being. What I'd like to ask for you to do for homework is helping yourself identify and label an emotion and asking yourself, does this emotion fit the facts? Is it justified? If not, how can you act opposite? And maybe there's an opportunity to help teach a client that you're working with. So if you're experiencing fear and your urge is to run away, can you act opposite in an approach? If you're experiencing sadness and you want to withdraw and isolate, can you act opposite and get active? Please do join us next week for our final session. We'll be learning strategies for interpersonal effectiveness, same time, same place. Resources are here as always. We will be sharing these with you, of course. Uh-oh. Here's my email, and then evaluation, and I'll pass it over to Kathy.
Thank you, Crystal, so much for such a wonderful, informative, and useful webinar and on emotional strategies for emotional regulation, emotion regulation. So on your screen, you see a QR code. You can scan the QR code to take the evaluation survey. I have also shared it in the chat box. I will share it again since the chat box is pretty busy and we have a lot of wonderful, encouraging feedback. I really appreciate everyone's participation and input. As a reminder, all of the slides and the recording will be posted within a week on our website, and you will receive a link to access them. Also, within a week, you will also receive a certificate of completion. Please check your junk or spam folders, and also sometimes due to the volume of our emails, there are certain email addresses that do block us. So please check your junk or spam folder for those follow-up emails. We've been having that issue lately. Again, I wanted to thank everyone for joining us today. The link for registration for next week's webinar will also be shared in the email, and I have also shared it in the chat as well. I'm going to reshare it right now for our fourth and final session. Again, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Thank you, Crystal, for providing us our webinar. And we hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day and see you next week.